My parents always said this forest was a magical place.
Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The 2025 adaptation of Snow White represents a bold and ambitious return of one of Disney's most iconic and foundational fairy tale stories, marking a major moment in the evolution of classic cinema into the modern age, where storytelling expectations, cultural perspectives, and representation standards have all dramatically transformed since the original animated film debuted in 1937. This upcoming movie is positioned not merely as a nostalgic revisit to the tale that launched Disney's feature film legacy, but as a refreshed, reimagined production designed to resonate with an entirely new generation of audiences who have grown up surrounded by complex characters, deeper themes, and visually breathtaking fantasy worlds. The character of Snow White has long symbolized innocence, kindness, and archetypal fairy tale beauty, but in this new film, Disney aims to reshape her persona into something more dynamic, a young woman who is not defined solely by her gentleness or vulnerability, but by the strength she discovers through her own journey, leadership qualities, intelligence, and emotional resilience. Directed with a modern cinematic approach, Snow White, 2025, is crafted to deliver emotional depth, high-stakes adventure, and bold creative decisions that differentiate it from the traditional formula audiences have known for decades. From the moment this project was announced, excitement surged across the entertainment world as fans, filmmakers, and critics recognized the significance of bringing the original Disney princess into a new era. At the same time, the movie also carries the challenging responsibility of honoring the foundation laid by the original film while expanding beyond it in unexpected, meaningful ways. For Disney, this film is not just a remake. It is a statement of legacy, progress, and creative evolution. The new adaptation introduces a fresh interpretation of beloved characters, magical lore, and emotional core, all while staying connected to the essential narrative of a young woman forced into opposition with a jealous evil queen who fears Snow White's growing power, beauty, and potential. The movie intends to deepen the relationships Snow White forms with allies she meets along her dangerous journey, capturing themes of trust, unity, courage, and chosen family. Rachel Zegler, known for her breakout role in West Side Story, steps into the iconic role of Snow White with a performance that blends vulnerability and determination, representing a heroine who actively shapes her own destiny instead of waiting for external rescue. This aligns with modern storytelling trends that empower central characters to drive the progression of the narrative. Meanwhile, Gal Gadot's portrayal of the evil queen adds star power, intensity, and emotional complexity, transforming the villain into a more layered antagonist whose motivations are rooted in deep insecurity and an obsession with maintaining dominance and control. Visually, audiences will witness a world enriched with advanced filmmaking techniques, immersive green screen environments, transformative character motion, refined lighting effects, and magical artistry that brings the fairy tale kingdom to life with incredible realism and theatrical wonder. The music of Snow White, 2025, will also play a major role in shaping the film's emotional resonance, blending new original songs with a modernized sound while still echoing the classical charm of Disney's musical heritage. The film's creative team has openly expressed their dedication to preserving elements that are beloved by generations of fans, such as the themes of hope, dreams, and moral courage, while simultaneously pushing boundaries to reflect a society that values equality, independence, and diverse representation. This results in a film that not only honors history, but actively pushes beyond it, offering a Snow White who doesn't simply wish upon a dream. She works to build a better future alongside those she cares about. Another crucial dimension of this adaptation is the challenge of portraying the magic, danger, and emotional stakes in a way that appeals to both nostalgic adults and younger viewers who expect fast-paced storytelling and cinematic extravagance. Disney's intentions seem clear. Craft a film that builds on the timeless power of fairy tales while evolving into a story that feels relevant and inspiring in the 21st century. Disney also acknowledges the monumental influence the original Snow White had on the global film industry as the world's first full-length cel-animated feature. That legacy creates enormous expectations for this modern version, not just artistically, but culturally. The 2025 movie must carry the responsibility of respecting the fairy tale tradition while embracing the future of fantasy storytelling. The film's production design takes advantage of advanced filmmaking tools to build captivating sets, enchanting forests, and magical elements that upgrade the dreamlike wonder of the original animation. But more importantly, the emotional arc of the narrative now emphasizes empowerment, identity, and personal transformation, reinforcing the message that true leadership and inner beauty emerge from acts of bravery, compassion, and self-worth. While the core conflict between Snow White and the evil queen remains intact, the expanded script gives each character more narrative depth, motivations, and personal challenges that fuel their development throughout the story. As audiences around the world prepare for this release, speculation about character portrayals, plot updates, musical style, and visual reinterpretations continues to create massive anticipation. For Disney, Snow White, 2025, is more than just another remake. It represents a powerful test of how classical fairy tales can adapt to the values and expectations of today's generation. It aims to inspire viewers, young and old alike, to see familiar characters in a new light and recognize timeless messages through refreshing storytelling. This film's introduction marks the beginning of a renewed journey into a magical world full of adventure, danger, and transformation, reminding everyone why Snow White remains a pioneering icon in cinematic history. With its modernized hero, captivating villain, and visually stunning fairy tale universe, Snow White, 2025, stands ready to reclaim its place at the heart of Disney's legacy while opening an exciting new chapter for the future of live-action fairy tale adaptations. The anticipation surrounding this release reflects the deep emotional connection audiences continue to feel with this classic tale, and their eagerness to see how its rebirth will redefine the narrative of the princess who started it all. In every way, this new introduction promises that the magic of Snow White will once again shine brightly, captivating imaginations and reinforcing the belief that courage, kindness, and self-discovery remain at the core of every great adventure story. The 2025 iteration of Snow White marks more than just another remake of a beloved story. It signals the return of a key pillar in the Walt Disney Company's cinematic foundation, and an opportunity to reconnect modern audiences with the origins of Disney's fairy tale universe. The original animated version of Snow White, released in 1937, holds the distinction of being the first full-length cel-animated feature film, and over the decades it has become an icon of film history, animation innovation, and the cultural legacy of storytelling. In deciding to revisit this narrative in 2025, Disney is leaning into its own heritage and simultaneously acknowledging the shifting expectations of today's viewers, who demand stronger character arcs, more inclusive themes, and high production values that blend nostalgia with innovation. This return is layered. On one level, it is a commercial move designed to re-engage moviegoing audiences in a world increasingly dominated by streaming content and franchise fatigue. By choosing a story as fundamental as Snow White, Disney is betting on familiarity and emotional resonance. They are tapping into decades of accumulated goodwill, recognition, and mythic status. Audiences know the central beats. A princess forced into the wilderness, a jealous queen, forest animals, dwarfs, a spell, a kiss. That recognition works as a foundation. But on another level, this project is a statement that Disney is capable of honoring its past while stepping into the present. The decision invites questions. How do you preserve what made the original special? Its sense of wonder, its simple yet emotionally effective storytelling, while updating it for a world where fairy tales no longer just teach passive virtue, but encourage active agency and empowerment. From a production standpoint, the return of this classic means that the creative team must walk a fine line between fidelity and deviation. They must decide what to replicate straight from the original: key characters, iconic moments, signature songs, memorable imagery. At the same time, they must decide what to change: tone, pacing, visual design, character motivation, supporting cast, expanded lore, and thematic depth. Failure to balance those well can lead to either a stale retread or a disjointed departure that doesn't capture the original's essence. The 2025 film bears this burden. Fans will scrutinize whether it feels like Snow White, whether it still captures that sense of innocence, danger, magic, and purity, whether the evil queen remains a worthy foe, whether the film retains heart and hope. It's worth noting that returning to a classic also involves cultural reinterpretation. The original 1937 version was born in a very different time. Social expectations, gender roles, cinematic tropes were all distinct. A modern audience watches through the lenses of equality, representation, psychological complexity, and aesthetic sophistication. The new Snow White must therefore address the layers that the original didn't, whether consciously or unconsciously. Who has power? Who gets to speak? What defines true beauty? How community and voice matter? These questions must be woven in. The return is not just in form, but in meaning. The story must still speak to contemporary values without losing its fairy tale roots. It must feel timeless, yet timely. This renewal also rolls into the broader trend within Disney and Hollywood of reimagining classic properties for new generations. Some of these updates succeed brilliantly by bringing fresh vision. Others struggle by either being too reverent or too radical. The key differentiator is the degree of adaptability. Can the film remain familiar enough to evoke nostalgia, but different enough to feel fresh and essential? With Snow White 2025, the hope is that the filmmakers will treat the original not as a fixed relic but as a springboard, a foundation, from which creative expansion can occur. An additional dimension of bringing back a classic lies in the marketing and audience expectation. Longtime Disney fans carry memories of the animated film. Newer audiences may have only cursory familiarity. The promotional strategy, then, must speak to both. Reassure the loyal by signaling homage and respect. Attract the new by signaling evolution, relevance, excitement. Teaser trailers might highlight key moments of recognition, like the evil queen's mirror, the forest flight, the seven dwarfs. while also highlighting new elements, perhaps new characters, expanded narrative arcs, modern set pieces, dynamic visuals. The film's return is in part about reaffirming that stories like Snow White still resonate, that the themes of jealousy, redemption, friendship, self-discovery, fear, and hope are universal and enduring. The adaptation can use new cinematic tools, special effects, motion capture, advanced editing, modern cinematography, to bring the magic alive in ways the original could not. Yet, the return also means accepting risk. When you bring back a classic, you bring back expectations, sometimes unrealistic ones. There is the danger of nostalgia overshadowing innovation, or of innovation erasing the heart of what made the original meaningful. The creative team must anticipate critical scrutiny, fan comparisons, social media commentary, and the heightened voice of global audiences. They also have to navigate the production pressures, budget, box office expectations, global distribution, and the franchise potential for sequels or spin-offs. The decision to return to Snow White shows confidence on Disney's part, but it also places the film under the spotlight. Ultimately, the 2025 film's return is about reaffirming the power of fairy tales. It speaks to the idea that stories once told in simple, black-and-white moral terms can be retold for a world that demands nuance. It's about showing that classic isn't an excuse for complacency. It's an invitation for reinvention. The return of Snow White is more than a movie release. It is a cultural moment, a dialogue between past and present, a bridge connecting the innocence of yesteryear with the voices of tomorrow. For you as a reviewer or content creator, this is fertile ground. You can explore what's been kept, what's been changed, what it says about us now, and how the legacy of the original continues to shape cinematic storytelling. The return of this Disney classic reminds us that even the oldest stories can find new life, and that revisiting them is not just about looking backward, but about stepping forward. Rachel Zegler's casting as Snow White in Disney's 2025 live-action adaptation represents one of the most significant and talked-about creative decisions in this modern reimagining, and her portrayal aims to redefine the character in a way that speaks directly to contemporary audiences while still honoring the emotional spirit of the original princess. Zegler is known for her powerful vocal presence, emotional authenticity, and ability to play characters with heartfelt vulnerability and strong inner resilience, qualities that position her perfectly for a more active and empowered interpretation of Snow White. Unlike the passive portrayal in the 1937 classic, this new Snow White is envisioned as a leader, a young woman discovering her purpose, and someone who earns her strength through personal struggle and courage rather than simply being rescued by fate. With her unique combination of gentleness and determination, Zegler is set to bring depth to Snow White's evolution, from a sheltered girl to a brave protagonist who takes control of her own destiny. Before Snow White, Rachel Zegler made her cinematic mark with her award-winning performance in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, where she stunned audiences through both her voice and expressive acting. Her ability to command the screen while maintaining emotional softness has given Disney full confidence that she can balance Snow White's iconic purity with newly written layers of bold initiative and intelligent decision-making. Where earlier interpretations focused heavily on Snow White's beauty and innocence, Zegler's version aims to explore inner qualities such as compassion that fuels action, bravery that responds to danger, and leadership that emerges from survival. This reshaped arc reflects modern expectations for Disney heroines, characters who not only inspire hope but demonstrate agency through their own choices. One of the most important aspects of Zegler's portrayal is how she transforms traditional fairy tale femininity into empowerment. In the original story, Snow White is often sheltered, dependent on others for protection, and defined largely by her kindness and physical beauty. In contrast, this adaptation allows her to confront the evil queen not simply as a victim, but as an assertive challenger to toxic power. With Rachel at the forefront, Snow White becomes someone who rises against suppression, who consciously fights for freedom, and who nurtures a sense of self-worth beyond the validation of others. These qualities align with current storytelling standards in which heroines are not only symbols of goodness, but active drivers of change within their worlds. Zegler's emotional intelligence shines in roles that require sincerity without weakness, and that balance fits perfectly with Disney's new vision of a princess who leads rather than waits. Zegler's vocal performance is also expected to play a central role, as music remains a defining trait of the Snow White legacy. Her strong theatrical voice is capable of carrying powerful emotional storytelling through song, not just high notes and beautiful melodies, but messages of struggle, hope, aspiration, and triumph. The new soundtrack gives Snow White fresh musical pieces designed to expand her feelings and motivations beyond classic fairy tale simplicity. With Zegler's established success in musical cinema, audiences can anticipate heartfelt performances that deepen our connection to the character, making her dreams feel lived in rather than distant fantasies. Her singing style will bridge the classic melodic essence of Disney princess songs with a modern tone that emphasizes inner strength. Another defining element of Rachel Zegler's Snow White is representation. Her casting symbolizes a broader movement toward inclusivity and diversity in storytelling. Disney chose to move beyond the narrow interpretation of princesses to reflect a world of varied identities and cultures. Rachel, being of Colombian and Polish descent, brings a new dimension to Snow White's image, reminding viewers that heroines are not bound by one look or single cultural standard. This shift challenges traditional expectations while opening doors for new generations of viewers to see themselves represented in the stories that shape childhood imagination. Disney's decision communicates a global message. Beauty, leadership, and heroism are universal qualities that transcend old boundaries. However, such bold changes naturally invited public discussions and mixed reactions online. Some audiences celebrated the evolution and praised the studio for making progressive choices. Others expressed concerns about altering a character that holds nostalgic value for millions. Through this conversation, Rachel Zegler's role stands as a symbol of how storytelling evolves with time, and how reinterpretation can create tension while still moving narrative culture forward. The pressure and attention surrounding her casting highlight how significant this movie is for Disney's future direction, whether classic stories should remain untouched or continue to grow alongside society. Regardless of the debate, Zegler approaches her role with passion and respect, eager to honor the root of the character while confidently stepping into the new vision crafted for her. Her performance will likely emphasize the emotional realism of Snow White's journey. When she escapes into the forest, instead of being merely frightened and helpless, she may face fear but learn strength from enduring it. Her relationships with new allies, whether traditional dwarfs or reimagined companions, will not just offer protection, but collaborative growth. Snow White becomes a catalyst for unity, someone who inspires loyalty through her courage and empathy. This transformation enhances the narrative stakes. Instead of a princess waiting to be saved, she becomes a leader worth fighting for. Zegler's acting skills will bring forward the inner battles alongside the external ones. Identity, trust, responsibility, and destiny, making her triumph feel earned and deeply personal. Rachel Zegler's Snow White stands at the intersection of legacy and evolution. She carries the responsibility of embodying the first Disney princess, a role filled with historical weight and emotional expectation, while also shaping what the next generation of princesses may look like: fierce yet kind, gentle yet unbreakable. Her performance offers a new perspective. Beauty is not merely visual, but rooted in character, conviction, and the courage to confront injustice. With this film, Disney hopes audiences will witness not just a retelling but a rebirth of Snow White, one powered by a heroine who chooses bravery over silence, action over fear, and leadership over dependency. Through her talent, her voice, and her modern interpretation, Rachel Zegler is not just playing Snow White, she is redefining her. And in doing so, she helps push forward the message that fairy tales remain relevant because they continue to grow, evolve, and reflect the spirit of the people who hear them. Gal Gadot's portrayal of the evil queen in Snow White, 2025, stands as one of the most anticipated performances in the film, bringing a new level of power, elegance, and psychological depth to one of Disney's most iconic villains. Known for playing strong, commanding roles, including her worldwide success as Wonder Woman, Gadot enters this character from an entirely different emotional direction. Not as a hero, but as a woman consumed by envy, fear of irrelevance, and the desperate need for control. The evil queen has always been defined by her obsession with beauty and power. However, the 2025 adaptation aims to humanize that obsession, revealing the insecurity and deep emotional fractures that fuel her descent into darkness. Instead of a flat, purely wicked villain, Gadot's queen becomes a complex antagonist whose cruelty is rooted in internal conflict, her dread of being overshadowed and forgotten. With her sharp screen presence and commanding confidence, Gadot embodies the regal side of the evil queen, poised, intimidating, breathtakingly glamorous. But she also brings a subtle vulnerability that makes her dangerous motives feel grounded and believable. Her performance suggests that the queen is not born evil. She is shaped by a world that values beauty as status and power as survival. This layered interpretation elevates the character beyond the caricatured villain of the 1937 animation, turning her into a fully realized figure audiences can recognize and even empathize with, despite her dark choices. The internal narrative becomes not just mirror jealousy, but a cautionary tale about the fear of losing value in a society that worships youth and perfection. Gadot's physicality and acting style are expected to add a stronger sense of threat and authority. When the queen issues commands, there isn't just anger, there's strategy. When she plots against Snow White, she does so not from impulsive rage, but from a well-crafted desire to extinguish a perceived threat before it grows. The evil queen in this adaptation understands influence, manipulation, and psychological warfare. She uses charm like a weapon, masking cruelty behind elegance. Audience members will likely witness a villain who smiles as she destroys, who performs wickedness with grace, and whose sophistication only enhances the terror she unleashes. Visually, Gal Gadot's evil queen represents a fusion of classic Gothic villainy with modern cinematic intensity. Her costumes are likely designed to symbolize dominance: dark fabrics, sharp silhouettes, glittering crowns that serve as both beauty and armor. Her magical transformations, powered by advanced filmmaking technology, will create a much more immersive portrayal of sorcery and corruption. The tension between her stunning visual beauty and her moral ugliness highlights the core theme of the story. Beauty without compassion becomes dangerous, even monstrous. Gadot's screen charisma ensures that the queen will command attention every time she appears, a presence that chills the room while captivating it at the same time. A major highlight of this adaptation is expected to be the relationship dynamic between the evil queen and Snow White. Instead of a simple predator-prey opposition, the clash evolves into a multi-layered battle of identity, power, and future. Gadot's queen doesn't just want Snow White gone, she wants to crush the idea of what Snow White represents: hope, possibility, and a new generation rising. This intensifies the emotional stakes. When she consults the magic mirror, her words carry more than vanity. They reflect fear of losing her throne, influence, and legacy. That internal fear transforms her into an increasingly dangerous ruler, making every choice more extreme and calculated as she fights against the inevitability of change. Gadot's casting also expands the cultural interpretation of the character. Her international background contributes to a broader representation within Disney's most legendary mythologies, reinforcing that power and villainy can be expressed through many different identities and appearances. She redefines the evil queen not as a stereotype, but as a character whose ambition resonates across cultures, a portrayal that shows how universal the human struggle for relevance and dominance can be. This also opens space for audiences to discuss how society pressures individuals, especially women in positions of power, to maintain impossible standards in order to remain respected. Musically, if the queen receives new songs or thematic arrangements. Godot's delivery will likely emphasize theatrical intimidation, commanding tones, dramatic phrasing, and emotional strength. Even without singing taking center stage, her vocal cadence alone carries authority, making her threats feel sharp and unforgettable. Moviegoers can expect moments where the queen's voice alone defines the scene's atmosphere, rich with evil, intention, yet polished with royal sophistication, the transformation sequence, where the queen disguises herself to manipulate. Snow White is poised to become one of the most visually intense passages in the film. With modern VFX and Godot's performance range, this metamorphosis will likely reveal the inner corruption visually breaking through her elegant exterior. The choice to keep her beauty intact while showing psychological decay may even update the original narrative symbolism. Instead of ugliness representing evil, the film may highlight how evil can wear the mask of beauty, making it harder to detect and far more dangerous. Ultimately, Gal Gadot's interpretation of the evil queen holds the power to redefine the legacy of Disney villains in live-action cinema. A great villain elevates the hero, and by crafting a queen who is seductive, intelligent, and terrifyingly relatable, the film sets the perfect stage for Snow White's rise. Godot's queen forces Snow White to grow, not because she is simply wicked, but because she stands as a formidable embodiment of the fears Snow White must overcome. With every glare, every calculated move, and every spell cast in desperation, the evil queen becomes a cinematic force, the kind of villain audiences love to watch, fear to face, and never forget. Gal Gadot brings a rare intensity to the character, villainous but dignified, frightening but compelling, broken but unstoppable. Her performance ensures that when the evil queen returns to the screen, she will do so as one of Disney's most powerful antagonists, darker, grander, and more psychologically real than ever before. The storyline of Snow White, 2025, preserves the essential framework of the classic fairy tale: the innocent princess, the jealous queen, the escape into the forest, and the rise of a rightful leader. But the film modernizes every major narrative thread to create a richer, more emotionally intense and purpose-driven adventure. Instead of a story where Snow White is a passive victim of cruelty, this version transforms the narrative into a journey of self-realization, one where Snow White's identity, courage, and leadership are earned through hardship, discovery, and personal growth. The modern twist is not merely cosmetic. It evolves the very heart of the story. The film seeks to show that while kindness is a virtue, true transformation happens when kindness is paired with action, intelligence, and resilience. The film opens in the royal kingdom, where Snow White is already growing into a confident and curious young woman. She is aware of her kingdom's struggles: poverty among citizens, fear under the queen's rule, and a growing distance between the monarchy and the people. Her heart naturally leans toward compassion and fairness, shaping her early arc not as a naive dreamer, but someone who quietly questions why the world around her is unjust. This change immediately shifts how viewers connect with her. Instead of witnessing innocence blindly threatened, they watch a future leader forming, one the queen feels increasingly threatened by. The queen's jealousy is therefore expanded beyond beauty. Snow White represents power. The queen knows she is losing influence, love from the people, and the natural right to rule. The iconic magic mirror scene retains its chilling tone, but its meaning deepens. When the mirror reveals Snow White's rising superiority, the queen sees not just physical competition but a threat to her authority and legacy. Her desperation is tied to the fear that the world will move on without her, that a younger generation will replace her reign. This psychological conflict sets the storyline on a darker, more complex course. The queen's mission to destroy Snow White becomes a fight for survival in a world where hope is returning through Snow White's mere presence. Snow White's escape into the forest plays out as a powerful survival sequence. Instead of stumbling helplessly through danger, she faces her fear head-on. The forest remains mysterious and frightening, but the modern twist turns the sequence into Snow White's first step toward courage. She forms connections with animals and eventually meets the group of forest companions, not necessarily portrayed as the traditional seven dwarfs, but as diverse and unique characters who have been oppressed or cast aside by the Queen's rule. Their updated portrayal emphasizes unity through difference. They may come from various backgrounds, but they are bonded by shared struggle. Their relationship with Snow White becomes a major emotional anchor of the story. Rather than caring for her as a fragile outsider, they recognize her potential and together become a team, each learning from the other. Snow White provides hope and compassion where they had only known fear and isolation. They provide strength, skill, and guidance as she develops the bravery needed to confront the monarchy's tyranny. This shift from caretaker dynamic to partnership reinforces the modern message: nobody rises alone. Community and connection empower transformation. The iconic poisoned fruit moment receives a stronger narrative context. Snow White's near death does not happen because she is gullible or defenseless. It occurs as a result of trust, her belief in goodness even when the world has shown corruption. The tragedy lies not in weakness but in maintaining faith in humanity, which ultimately becomes her greatest strength once she returns. And in this adaptation, Snow White's revival relies less on an external savior and more on her own inner power and the loyalty of those she has inspired. Love is still a theme but not romantic rescue. Instead, collective care and unity become the force that brings Snow White back from the brink. One of the most significant modern twists is the central focus on leadership. The climax builds around Snow White confronting the Queen not only for her own survival, but for the future of the kingdom. Her victory is symbolic of the people reclaiming hope and standing against tyranny. Snow White does not just inherit her throne. She earns it by proving she is the rightful leader, wise, compassionate, and brave enough to challenge corruption. Her transformation shows viewers that true power lies not in beauty, but in purpose and courage. The film also introduces new cinematic elements, action-driven sequences, strategic planning, and emotional stakes that carry more intensity than the original. The tone balances wonder with danger, showing that fairy tale worlds have consequences and complexities that audiences can relate to. The humor is updated and grounded. The relationships feel more human, and the narrative ensures that Snow White is never sidelined in her own story. She is actively shaping every major turn of the plot. Thematically, Snow White 2025 shifts the fairy tale toward ideas of empowerment and change. It challenges outdated narratives that suggested identity and fate were predetermined. Instead, it tells viewers that strength is a choice. The story becomes an allegory of growth, discovering your voice, standing against injustice, and transforming fear into leadership. The evil queen, consumed by insecurity, represents a dying era of oppressive rule. Snow White embodies a future where compassion leads, where belonging is strengthened through diversity, and where love is defined by loyalty rather than royalty. Ultimately, the modern twist does not erase the magic, it deepens it. The story reminds us why Snow White became a legend in the first place: the ability to inspire hope even in the darkest places. But it also embraces the truth that hope alone must evolve. It must take action, build alliances, and believe in change. That is what makes Snow White 2025 a true evolution of the tale, a celebration of kindness transformed into courage. The 2025 Snow White movie introduces a bold reimagining of characters and roles that significantly differentiates it from the classic 1937 animated film, while also trying to connect with modern audiences who expect deeper narratives, more inclusive casting, and evolved personalities. One of the most discussed changes has been the transformation of the seven dwarfs into a diverse group of companions. Rather than focusing on a single characteristic per character, like grumpy, happy, sleepy, etc., the new version explores a range of personalities, backgrounds, and identities that reflect contemporary values. This change was made not only to avoid outdated stereotypes but also to create a stronger emotional and narrative connection between Snow White and her newfound allies. Each companion now contributes meaningfully to the plot. One might be the strategist, another the moral compass, another the comedic relief, and so on, together forming a team that supports Snow White's journey toward independence and leadership rather than merely helping her survive. Snow White's role itself undergoes a major update. She is no longer a princess waiting helplessly for rescue. Instead, the film emphasizes her growth into a powerful and self-driven leader. Rachel Zegler's Snow White is portrayed as curious, brave, and emotionally intelligent. She starts the story with innocence and vulnerability, but learns how to stand against tyranny, particularly the evil queen's oppressive rule. Her relationship with the companions is based on teamwork rather than caretaking, as seen in the original where the dwarfs mainly protected her. In this modern version, Snow White protects them in return, showcasing reciprocal strength and compassion. This enhancement aligns the film with the increasing demand for empowered female leads, particularly in fairy tales where traditional portrayals often relied heavily on male saviors. Another significant update is to the prince character, who reportedly has a much smaller or altered role compared to typical fairy tale narratives. Rather than centering the story around romantic love, the film prioritizes Snow White's personal development and her responsibility to reclaim her rightful place in the kingdom. The prince may still exist as a character to inspire hope or symbolize partnership, but he is not the reason Snow White becomes strong. She chooses strength because she must, because she believes in justice, and because she refuses to let fear define her fate. This narrative shift honors the nostalgia of fairy tales while correcting the outdated ideas about dependency and romance that no longer resonate with modern audiences. The evil queen also receives notable enhancements to her character depth. Gal Gadot's performance brings sophistication, drama, and charisma to the villain's motivations. Instead of being driven simply by vanity, this queen is a complex antagonist whose hunger for power and control over beauty, influence, and public perception creates a more relatable and frightening threat. Her transformation magic, manipulation of the magic mirror, and psychological warfare elevate the story from a basic rivalry to a symbolic struggle against oppressive ideals, especially the unrealistic standards placed on women and leadership. The queen represents a universal fear, losing relevance in a world that values youth and beauty excessively. Her role highlights how dangerous insecurity can become when combined with authority. Along with these core character updates, the 2025 film also introduces supporting roles that were not present in the original version. These new characters, potentially loyal citizens, palace workers, or forest allies, contribute to world building, expanding the kingdom beyond a simplistic fairy tale backdrop. They may help emphasize political tension, cultural richness, or social struggles under the queen's rule. These additional characters also help express major themes: unity, bravery, fairness, and rebuilding a shattered kingdom. New antagonistic forces may appear, such as guards, creatures, or advisors who serve the queen and increase narrative stakes by presenting continuous danger, forcing Snow White to think strategically rather than relying on pure luck or coincidence. The companions, formerly known as the dwarves, also undergo updated wardrobe, abilities, and personalities to support the more action-driven storyline. Instead of working only in a mine, they might have different professions: a healer, an inventor, a musician, or even a warrior, which allows the film to create fresh scenes, dynamic interactions, and clever teamwork elements. Their humor remains a core part of the story, but now balanced with heartfelt emotional arcs that show their own growth. Some of them might struggle with personal fears, past trauma, or self-doubt, making their journey toward courage mirror Snow White's transformation. Through this, the message becomes universal. Heroes are not born fearless. They become brave by standing together when danger rises. These new character arcs contribute massively to the film's pacing, giving audiences more reasons to stay emotionally invested. Instead of following a predictable storyline, the film invites viewers to join a collaborative quest where each character has a purpose and where every choice influences the kingdom's future. This transition from princess story to adventure story upgrades Snow White into a more cinematic experience capable of competing in a modern blockbuster market dominated by action, fantasy, and strong character ensembles like Marvel, Disney live actions, and major fantasy franchises. Representation also plays a very important role in shaping these updated characters. The film focuses on cultural inclusivity, ensuring audiences from different backgrounds see themselves reflected in the story. Casting diversity isn't just about appearances. It enriches the emotional texture of the film and helps Disney evolve beyond its earlier portrayals that were limited to Eurocentric fairy tale tropes. With music influenced by multiple cultures, dialogue that emphasizes equality, and characters who express individuality, Snow White, 2025, hopes to inspire the next generation while honoring the original film's legacy of dreams and magic. In conclusion, the updates to characters and roles in Snow White, 2025, are bold, modern, and highly intentional. Snow White becomes a leader, not a damsel. The companions become a heroic team, not comic stereotypes. The Queen becomes a dynamic villain with deeper psychological impact. Romance becomes optional rather than essential. The story becomes more than a fairy tale. It becomes a powerful message about courage, identity, justice, and unity. These changes are designed to keep the emotional heart of Disney alive while shaping a more relevant, forward-thinking narrative that resonates with audiences in 2025 and beyond. The music and soundtrack of Snow White, 2025, play a crucial role in reshaping the classic fairy tale for a modern generation, while still paying tribute to the iconic melodies that have remained beloved since the 1937 Disney original. The musical evolution of this film reflects changing tastes in cinema. Today's audiences expect emotionally rich soundtracks with powerful vocals, contemporary lyrical themes, and orchestral scores that heighten dramatic storytelling. The original film's songs like Hi-Ho, Someday My Prince Will Come, and Whistle While You Work defined the golden era of animated musicals. But the 2025 version aims to elevate the experience with new compositions and reimagined versions designed to resonate with younger viewers, who crave cinematic energy and emotional complexity. Rachel Zegler, known for her breathtaking vocals in West Side Story, brings a refreshing musical dimension to Snow White's character. Her singing is not merely a performance. It reflects Snow White's internal journey. Early in the movie, her songs carry a lighter, hopeful tone, expressing innocence and dreams of a kinder world. However, as the story progresses and challenges arise, the music matures with her. Orchestral crescendos accompany moments of bravery, while softer piano or guitar melodies highlight emotional reflections. This transition ensures that the soundtrack isn't just background entertainment. It becomes a narrative force that guides audiences through Snow White's growth from victim to hero. The musical strategy focuses on empowerment, rather than romantic longing. Instead of singing about waiting for a prince to save her, Snow White's new signature songs emphasize believing in oneself, finding courage, and fighting for justice. These contemporary lyrical messages align with the film's vision of a proactive protagonist who takes control of her own destiny. Disney is well aware that modern audiences admire strong characters. Therefore, the tone of the soundtrack embodies hope, determination, and resilience. It celebrates courage as something ordinary people can develop, not something granted magically or by royalty. Gal Gadot, portraying the evil queen, also receives her own musical moments, but with a darker, more sophisticated twist. Her songs explore vanity, obsession with power, and fear of fading relevance. These scenes make the villain far more chilling because her confidence is expressed through commanding vocals fused with eerie, suspenseful instrumentation. The Queen's music incorporates elements like echoing choirs, metallic percussion, and dramatic strings to reflect the psychological horror beneath her beauty. When she interacts with the magic mirror, the soundtrack emphasizes haunting emotion, reinforcing how twisted ambitions can corrupt even the most glamorous facade. This musical characterization makes her not only visually intimidating, but sonically unforgettable. Beyond the leading characters, the companions, formerly dwarves, contribute musically too, but in a refreshed style. Rather than simplistic, cheerful songs purely for comedy, their musical numbers blend humor with storytelling purpose. They may sing about unity, survival, or the importance of friendship, while using a mix of folk-style instruments and modern beats. These songs deepen our understanding of each companion's personality and their role in the team. Music becomes a bonding language, a way to show how this group of unlikely allies becomes a family who stands together against injustice. Instrumentally, the score features a powerful fusion of traditional orchestral arrangements and modern cinematic sound design. The natural world of the forest is represented through flutes, harps, and soft string patterns, celebrating the beauty and harmony Snow White discovers. In sharp contrast, the palace and the queen's dark magic are scored with brass, choirs, and digital bass pulses to highlight corruption and unease. These sound contrasts are designed to make viewers feel the difference between freedom and control, love and fear, hope and darkness, even without seeing the visuals. Disney's signature magic is preserved through leitmotifs, musical phrases tied to specific characters and themes. Snow White has a hopeful motif that evolves throughout the story. The evil queen's motif is unsettling and becomes more intense as she descends further into obsession. Even the magic mirror has an auditory cue, a shimmering yet chilling sound that accompanies its supernatural presence. Over the course of the film, these musical identifiers help audiences subconsciously track character dynamics and plot developments, a standout feature of Snow White. 2025 is its emphasis on cinematic musical moments, sequences where rhythm and action align to drive excitement. Chase scenes, battles, and magical transformations are choreographed with dynamic, booming orchestral hits designed to give viewers goosebumps. These enhancements help the film compete with major fantasy blockbusters like Maleficent, Beauty and the Beast, live action, and other Disney remakes. Sound becomes spectacle. Lyrically, the soundtrack promotes unity, justice, courage, and identity. It avoids outdated themes of helplessness or superficial romance. For example, where the original film highlighted finding love, this version highlights finding purpose. Children and adults alike can connect to ideas like standing up for what is right, embracing individuality, and believing in possibilities even when the world seems frightening. The soundtrack also incorporates world-class production techniques. Grammy-winning composers and producers have worked to ensure that the music stands strong even outside the movie, encouraging streaming success on music platforms and making songs replayable hits, just like Let It Go from Frozen or How Far I'll Go from Moana. This commercial potential demonstrates Disney's strategy. Music isn't just part of the film. It is a major part of the marketing and cultural influence behind the film. In summary, the music and soundtrack enhancements in Snow White 2025 represent a bold evolution of Disney musical storytelling. Iconic nostalgia is preserved through hints of original melodies, while powerful new songs redefine the characters for today's audiences. Snow White's voice becomes a symbol of strength. The Queen's songs expose dangerous insecurity. The companions sing to celebrate unity. The orchestra and modern sound design lift the fantasy into blockbuster status. Altogether, the soundtrack transforms the fairy tale into an emotional, inspiring, and unforgettable cinematic musical experience, one that honors Disney history while shaping a new era of storytelling. The visual effects and cinematic style of Snow White 2025 redefine the classic fairy tale into a visually immersive modern blockbuster experience that blends real-life environments with advanced CGI artistry. Disney aims to transport audiences into a world that feels both nostalgic and refreshingly new, a blend of enchanting realism, atmospheric fantasy, and emotional storytelling through visuals. With state-of-the-art technology, the film's production enhances everything from magical spells and fantasy creatures to forest environments, lighting design, and character animations. These enhancements ensure that the movie doesn't just retell a familiar story. It creates an entirely new visual spectacle that competes with the biggest fantasy films of the decade. The most noticeable advancement is the transformation of the enchanted forest into a living character within the story. Using detailed CGI landscapes, rich color palettes, and dynamic camera movement, the forest becomes a sanctuary that shelters Snow White, and later a battlefield where she fights for her kingdom. Real forests were used as references for textures, lighting reflections, and motion physics. But animators infused magical elements such as glowing foliage, enchanted wildlife, floating pollens, and soft luminescent flowers. These small yet impactful details make the forest feel protective, almost spiritually connected to Snow White's destiny. As she grows stronger, the forest appears more vibrant, reinforcing its symbolic representation of hope and rebirth. In contrast, the Queen's castle is designed with darker tones and sharp geometric architecture to reflect her cold, ruthless personality. Using a metallic and stone-dominated visual style, the castle showcases a haunting beauty, a place that is grand but suffocating. Visual effects enhance magic-infused structures like the Queen's laboratory, the poisonous apple chamber, and the iconic magic mirror. The mirror itself becomes a stunning visual centerpiece, a swirling dark portal with reflective depths that ripple like water but shimmer like metal. Its voice and appearance combine sound design with animation to portray an ancient force bound to her wicked command. When the Queen unleashes dark spells, the castle's shadows come alive, showing how her power corrupts everything around her. Character transformation scenes have some of the most impressive VFX in the movie. The Queen's shift into her darker forms showcases morphing technology that blends practical makeup with digital enhancements, allowing Gal Gadot's sinister elegance to dissolve into monstrous shadows or disguise herself in horrifying ways. This transformation visually communicates the themes of insecurity and vanity. The Queen changes her appearance not to hide, but to control others through fear. Magical energy effects, swirling smoke, shimmering lights, crackling reflections, elevate every spell into an unforgettable moment of cinematic tension. Snow White, on the other hand, receives visual effects that symbolize organic purity and inner courage. Her magic, if and when introduced, is tied to nature. Leaves swirling, soft glows, wind rushing as if the forest protects her like a mother. This creates a striking visual conflict between light and dark magic, reinforcing values like compassion versus corruption. Whether she is running through the forest or confronting danger, the camera highlights her connection to life and nature, visually expressing the heart of the narrative. The companions, formerly dwarves, bring unique visual personalities too. Rather than resembling a single unified design, each character has distinct features, clothing textures, and animated expressions that reflect their role in the story. Motion capture technology may be used to create realistic movement, while CGI blending ensures they integrate perfectly with live-action actors. Their interactions with Snow White feel natural and emotional thanks to advanced shading, lighting, and digital facial performance animation techniques. Action sequences in the film display an elevated cinematic approach compared to the original fairy tale. Disney integrates sweeping drone-style camera moves, dramatic slow-motion moments, and carefully timed visual effects to intensify battles, chases, and magical confrontations. When Snow White and her allies fight against the Queen's forces, sparks of magic illuminate the forest. Trees bend to protect heroes, and the environment shifts to show the stakes of the conflict. These sequences immerse the audience in a high-energy fantasy adventure rather than a strictly musical fairy tale. Cinematography plays a massive role in telling the emotional story. Warm, golden lighting dominates scenes that represent hope and innocence, especially early scenes in the village or peaceful moments with the companions. Cooler and darker tones take over when the Queen is present, Blues, blacks, and eerie greens show her lifeless obsession with beauty and dominance. This careful lighting contrast allows viewers to subconsciously feel uneasiness and relief depending on who controls the environment. The color palette evolves as Snow White's character grows. Initially, she is surrounded by soft pastels and natural freshness. As danger increases, stronger and bolder hues appear to reflect her courage and the heightened stakes of her journey. By the climax, the visuals explode with symbolic red, white, and black, representing danger, purity, and the Queen's envy colliding in a breathtaking finale that draws from the original's legendary imagery while making bold artistic improvements. Practical effects are also heavily incorporated. Real costume work, handcrafted sets, and on-location filming ensure authenticity where possible. CGI then enhances these real elements rather than replacing them completely. The result is a hybrid approach that feels grounded. Viewers can see the texture of Snow White's dress, the wood grain of a cottage, or the heat of firelight, but they also experience heightened fantasy layered seamlessly over tangible detail. The cinematic style uses a blend of classic fairy tale framing and modern visual storytelling. Some shots mimic storybook illustrations, wide, symmetrical compositions showcasing grand landscapes or magical moments. Other shots deliver intimate close-ups, allowing audiences to connect deeply with character emotion. The balance keeps the movie visually compelling, switching between epic spectacle and heartfelt human focus. Sound design is tightly integrated with visual effects. Magical scenes are punctuated with shimmering audio textures, while dark magic pulses with low-frequency dread. Environmental sounds, rustling leaves, crackling branches, faint animal calls, make the forest feel alive. Battle moments combine explosive audio hits with synchronized visual cues, creating action that feels powerful and cinematic. Overall, the visual and cinematic transformation of Snow White, 2025, reflects Disney's effort to preserve fairy tale beauty while competing with the realism and spectacle expected from modern films. This is not just a remake. It is a reinvented fantasy adventure where every frame carries purpose, emotion, and artistic vibrance. The upgraded visual effects make magic believable. The cinematography deepens character arcs, and the stylistic evolution lifts the film into a new age of storytelling, honoring the legacy of Disney's first animated classic while amplifying the world to a scale never before seen in a Snow White adaptation. The costumes and set design of Snow White, 2025, play a monumental role in reshaping this iconic fairy tale for a modern audience while carefully preserving the essence that made the original story timeless. Disney has invested deeply into visual world building through clothing, architecture, textures, and handcrafted elements that evoke European medieval fantasy while introducing updated aesthetic layers that reflect the film's empowering themes. Every costume and every set piece is designed not only for beauty but for storytelling, expressing character personality, emotional transformation, and the socio-political atmosphere of the kingdom. Snow White's wardrobe is one of the most significant updates in this film. In the 1937 classic, her iconic blue-yellow-red dress was designed to reflect animation constraints and fairy tale simplicity. But in 2025, Rachel Ziegler's Snow White is portrayed as a more dynamic figure who must move, fight, and survive. Therefore, her costumes focus on practicality while maintaining royal elegance. Her main dress still honors the original color palette, but with deeper textures, sturdier fabric, and more subtle embroidery that signifies her royal lineage. The sleeves are less exaggerated, giving her greater mobility for action sequences. As she transitions from frightened fugitive to rising leader, small costume details evolve. Her colors grow bolder. Her shoes change from delicate flats to more functional footwear. And a forest-crafted cloak symbolizes her newfound connection to nature and the companions who protect her. When Snow White reaches her full strength near the film's climax, her outfit becomes a powerful visual symbol. Brighter, cleaner, and more regal, often incorporating natural motifs like leaves or flower-stitched patterns. proving that she represents life, growth, and harmony. This transformation through clothing visually narrates her emotional arc without a single word spoken. The evil queen, portrayed by Gal Gadot, receives one of the most fashion-forward and visually striking wardrobes ever seen in a Disney villain. Her costumes harness gothic luxury, metallic accents, and structured silhouettes that express absolute dominance and high-crafted vanity. Early outfits emphasize refinement with shimmering jewels, rigid collars, and deep blacks mixed with emerald or crimson tones, visually representing pride, jealousy, and power. As her envy deepens and her sanity unravels, her clothing incorporates harsher edges, darker textures, and even magical enhancements that seem almost alive under particular lighting. Her transformation scene includes wardrobe changes that reflect her descent into dark sorcery. Fabrics become thorn-like, symbols of corrupt beauty appear in embroidery, and accessories carry visual weight like spiked crowns or serpentine jewelry. Her costumes communicate her psychological collapse more loudly than any spoken dialogue. The companions, the updated dwarves, also receive individualized costumes that support the new narrative direction. Instead of identical mining outfits, each character's wardrobe tells their personal backstory. One might wear layered patchwork to show creativity and resourcefulness, while another may use leather padding reflecting combat readiness. Their clothing adopts earthy tones that blend with the forest environment, but every companion has a unique color accent and accessory that symbolizes who they are: a musical pendant, a crafted tool, or hand-painted symbols from their past. These designs help audiences instantly distinguish each personality and role within the group. Moving into set design, the village where Snow White grows up is built with authentic European medieval architecture. Timber-framed houses, colorful handmade goods, bustling markets, and warm lighting from firelit interiors. This peaceful and lively environment contrasts heavily with the cold, imposing royal castle. When Snow White leaves the village, the shift in set design communicates her journey from innocence to danger. The Queen's castle is constructed with architectural precision. Tall archways, narrow corridors, polished stone surfaces, and dark-lit rooms that evoke isolation and authoritarian rule. The throne room is visually overwhelming with high ceilings, giant banners reflecting the Queen's image, and stone floors that echo every footstep, symbolizing power and surveillance. The magic mirror chamber is designed as a psychological battleground. Walls shaped like fractured reflections, surfaces that distort appearances, and floating candles that cast unsettling shadows. These visual cues highlight the Queen's obsession with image and deception. The castle's underground areas, alchemy rooms, hidden passages, and the secret laboratory where poison is created are crafted with rougher textures, twisted metal forms, and eerie green lighting to emphasize corruption brewing beneath the kingdom's surface. The forest sets are a triumph of creativity and technical collaboration. Real natural locations are enhanced through handmade props, massive constructed tree trunks, and integrated lighting systems that allow the environment to shift mood dynamically. When Snow White first enters the forest, the tone is eerie. Mist creeps between gnarled branches, and the path appears uncertain. But once she bonds with the companions, the forest brightens, with open spaces, visible sunlight beams, blooming flowers, and playful wildlife props that interact organically with the story. This reflects how the forest becomes a haven of healing and empowerment instead of fear. Interior sets include the companion's cottage, a cozy masterpiece full of handcrafted furniture, mismatched decorations and signs of life, cooking pots, musical instruments, herb jars, and warm lighting that create an immediate feeling of family and comfort. Each little detail helps transform supporting characters from sidekicks into fully realized individuals with history and heart. Weapons, tools, and props also receive careful design attention. Snow White does not rely on typical weaponry. Instead, she uses tools connected to nature and survival, reinforcing her role as a protector rather than a conqueror. The poisoned apple remains one of the most iconic props of the film. The design intensifies its danger with a glossy, almost supernatural shine that reflects light unnaturally, hinting at the evil lurking inside. Color theory guides the entire design direction. Snow White's environments use warm, natural palettes. Greens, browns, golds, representing life and humanity. The Queen dominates colder tones. Metallic silver, blue-black, deep violet, representing death, ego, and unnatural control. When Snow White's hope influences the kingdom, colors slowly shift throughout the movie, visually narrating the balance between fear and freedom. Another crucial element is symbolism in set design. For example, roses might appear wilted in the Queen's presence, blooming with Snow White. Palace banners may change once Snow White claims her rightful role. Ceremonial objects might visually communicate the kingdom's history and cultural richness. These symbolic touches allow the movie to communicate key themes visually, ensuring scenes remain emotionally impactful even in silence. Disney also incorporates modern sustainability practices behind the scenes. Many sets use eco-friendly materials, recyclable constructions, and repurposed props, blending artistic expression with responsible filmmaking. In conclusion, the costume and set design in Snow White 2025 elevate the film into a visually immersive world where every detail has purpose. The clothing reveals inner struggles and personal transformation. The environments reflect political control, emotional protection, and magical energies at play in the narrative. These elements ensure the audience isn't just watching a fairy tale. They are living in it. Through breathtaking craftsmanship, enhanced realism, and thematic symbolism, Disney honors the story's legacy while boldly redefining it for future generations. The differences between the 1937 animated classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and the 2025 live-action adaptation reflect nearly 9 decades of cultural evolution, filmmaking advancements, and changing audience expectations. Disney's first feature-length animated film was created in a time when storytelling norms were simple, female characters were often passive, and technology was still limited. In contrast, Snow White 2025 is designed for a world that values character depth, inclusivity, emotional realism, cinematic spectacle, and moral complexity. Almost every element, from Snow White's character arc to the portrayal of the Queen, the companions, tone, message, music, action, and visual identity, has evolved to resonate with today's viewers. The biggest narrative shift is Snow White herself. In the 1937 original, she embodied traditional fairy tale femininity, gentle, naive, nurturing, and dependent on the prince for rescue. Her role primarily involved housekeeping and singing about love while waiting for a savior. The new film transforms her from a passive dreamer into a courageous leader. Snow White no longer relies on romance for her future. Her purpose becomes reclaiming justice, rebuilding a broken kingdom, and discovering inner strength. She doesn't just hope for a better life, she fights for it. This transformation aligns with modern storytelling that celebrates empowerment, agency, and self-determination. The prince's role is also reimagined. In the 1937 film, the prince appears briefly, serving as a symbolic reward rather than a real character. The 2025 version gives him far less importance. The story focuses on Snow White's personal journey, friendships, and leadership. Romance is no longer the central theme or motivation. Instead of love saving Snow White, her strength, courage, and loyal allies do. The Seven Dwarfs undergo perhaps the most visibly notable change. In the original, they are comedic exaggerated characters defined by singular traits like sleepy, dopey, and grumpy. Their depictions reflected the animation style and humor of the 1930s. In 2025, they are reinvented as a diverse group of companions who are fully developed individuals with unique backstories, skills, and emotional significance. They are not just comic relief. They help shape Snow White into a strategist, survivor, and future queen. Their design, personality, and roles have matured with the narrative. transforming from caricatures into meaningful supporting heroes. The evil queen in the 1937 film is iconic but one-dimensional, vain, wicked, and motivated solely by jealousy. In the 2025 version, she is given psychological depth. Her insecurity about losing power, relevance, and beauty drives her madness. Her villainy becomes more chilling because it reflects real human flaws magnified by unchecked authority. She isn't evil just for drama. She's a tragic warning about obsession, narcissism, and fear of fading influence. Modern audiences see not only a villain, but a commentary on societal pressures, especially those placed on women in power. Tone and themes have shifted dramatically. The original emphasized fairy tale morality, purity versus wickedness, beauty versus ugliness, innocence versus corruption. The live-action version emphasizes courage versus oppression, identity versus control, resilience versus fear, and community versus tyranny. Snow White's growth replaces romantic destiny. Justice replaces escapism. Leadership replaces servitude. These thematic upgrades ensure relevance in a world that values internal strength more than external beauty. The magic mirror, originally a talking face floating in glass, becomes a more complex supernatural presence in the 2025 film. Its design is darker, its power more ancient, and its influence on the queen more psychologically destructive. The mirror is no longer a simple truth-teller. It manipulates, warns, and heightens tension, embodying toxic perfection and fueling the queen's downfall. The poisoned apple scene remains iconic but becomes visually and emotionally richer. In 1937, Snow White's fall happened almost immediately, leading directly to her death-like sleep. In the new version, the moment is longer, tense, and symbolic, representing the cost of trust, the power of corruption, and the turning point where Snow White's vulnerability transforms into strength as her allies rally to save her. Visually, the differences are monumental. The original relied on hand-drawn animation with flat backgrounds and simple motion physics. It was groundbreaking for its time, but technology has evolved. The 2025 film integrates lifelike CGI environments, detailed practical sets, enhanced magic visuals, motion-captured performances, cinematic camera choreographies, make the story more immersive, darker in places, and more emotionally charged. Instead of cute cartoon creatures and slapstick antics, viewers experience a believable fantasy realm where danger feels real and magic feels powerful. The forest scenes, once whimsical and slightly frightening, now shift dynamically with mood, illustrating emotional transitions with weather, lighting, and environmental behavior. The setting is not merely decoration. It participates in storytelling. Another huge shift is the tone of humor. In 1937, comedy relied on physical gags and exaggerated expressions. In 2025, humor comes from character relationships, sarcastic banter, and emotional bonding. More natural, less cartoonish. The music is another defining innovation. The original created some of the most classic Disney songs in history, but they were simple and reflective of the time. Today's soundtrack incorporates contemporary lyrical meaning, epic orchestral scoring, darker villain compositions. Character-driven vocal storytelling songs serve deeper emotional purpose, not just entertainment. The final resolution changes fundamentally. In 1937, Snow White is saved by a prince's kiss, a romantic ending that relies on fate. In the 2025 version, Snow White's survival is likely achieved through the unity of those who love and believe in her, showing that her life is not dependent on romantic salvation. She claims her throne, not because she is beautiful, but because she leads with compassion and bravery. The ending reinforces leadership and justice rather than romantic closure. Politically and culturally, the original film mirrored its era, a world with clear gender roles and limited representation. The new film prioritizes diverse casting, inclusive character portrayals, and empowerment messaging for audiences around the globe. In essence, The differences between the two versions are not just cosmetic. They reflect the evolution of society's values. The 1937 film will always remain a legendary masterpiece, a cornerstone of animation history. But Snow White, 2025, aims to redefine what the story means today, a tale of resistance, hope, equality, and personal transformation. The Disney legacy is preserved, but upgraded. What once was a fairy tale about beauty and dreams is now a cinematic epic about courage and destiny. These changes ensure that Snow White continues to inspire future generations, not through innocence, but through strength. In the 2025 adaptation of Snow White, 2025 film, the themes of courage and leadership are not merely decorative motifs, but serve as the backbone of the film's narrative. Character arcs, visual design, and emotional impact. From the first frames, the story positions its protagonist, Rachel Zegler's Snow White, not as a passive figure waiting for rescue, but as someone who must learn to stand, decide, and lead. This shift radically reorients the fairy tale from the traditional damsel-in-distress model to one of active agency. The heroine steps into her own power, confronts fear, inspires others, and becomes a unifying force. At the same time, the antagonist, Gal Gadot's evil queen, exemplifies what happens when leadership is corrupted by fear, vanity, and the refusal to change. Together, these dual arcs create a rich thematic landscape where courage is not simply heroic impulse, but the layered result of fear, growth, responsibility, and community. To begin with, the film introduces courage in its simplest form, the courage to question. Snow White in this version questions the existing order of the kingdom, the distance between the throne and the people, and what it means to be fairest in a land where suffering is widespread. Her earliest courageous acts may seem modest, speaking up for workers, quietly opposing injustice, or refusing to accept the status quo, but they set the tone for her leadership evolution. It's not overnight bravery, but incremental steps, noticing problems, making small choices, and growing into greater ones. Viewers witness that real leadership arises not from virtue alone, but from the willingness to act even when the path is uncertain. As the story advances, Snow White faces more formidable tests of courage, fleeing the palace, surviving in the forest, forging alliances, and confronting the evil queen. These moments dramatize the theme of leadership under pressure. Leadership here is not glamorous. It is responsibility under fire. When Snow White takes command of her group of companions, formerly dwarves but now reimagined as diverse allies, she must earn trust, rally the weak, plan action, and accept that others depend on her. This shift from isolated heroine to leader among equals underscores the film's message. Leadership is collaborative. It is not about ruling over others but standing with them. This idea is central to both the narrative arc and the emotional core of the movie. Courage in this film is paired with vulnerability. Snow White does not act because she is fearless. She acts despite fear. The visual style, plot events, and music all support this. The forest sequences are dark and menacing. The queen's threats feel real. The companions falter. Yet Snow White chooses to lead anyway. This reveals a nuanced truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. That distinction matters, and the film uses it to deepen the character work. Her leadership is believable because we see her doubts, her mistakes, and her growth. When she makes the right call, it carries weight because it is hard-won. This evolution gives the audience someone to root for, someone whose journey includes struggle and transformation, not perfection from the start. The theme of leadership extends beyond Snow White to the community she builds and inspires. True leadership in this narrative means giving voice to the voiceless, uplifting those who feel powerless, and building hope where despair has taken root. She does not simply confront the queen for herself. She confronts her for the people, the land, and the future. This wider vantage point elevates the theme. Leadership is protective, service-oriented, and transformational. The companions are not sidekicks. They are part of the movement. The people of the kingdom are not background. They are stakeholders in the change. This ensemble approach reinforces that leadership requires trust, shared sacrifice, and collective vision. Contrasting Snow White's leadership is the evil queen's warped version of it. The queen commands, demands, and manipulates. Her authority is based on fear, beauty, and control, rather than compassion, integrity, and partnership. The film uses this contrast to highlight what leadership should and should not be. The queen's fear of being overtaken, of losing value, and of confronting change drives her tyranny. Her pseudo-leadership is reactive, not proactive, rigid, not adaptive, isolated, not relational. That contrast makes Snow White's rise more compelling. The audience sees not only a hero's journey but a leadership transition, from coercion to collaboration, from dominance to dignity. Visually and tonally, the film reinforces these themes of courage and leadership. Dark, confining castle spaces symbolize oppressive rule, whereas the forest spaces, initially scary, then safe, symbolize transformation and communal growth. As Snow White begins to lead, the visual palette brightens. Her costume becomes more regal yet practical. The environment opens. The music swells, more characters join her side, and the stakes increase. Cinematography emphasizes her perspective. Wide shots that show community behind her. Close-ups that reveal her resolve and doubt. The direction seeks to immerse viewers in the idea that leadership is grounded in place and people, not just ideals. Another dimension is the moral courage required to lead well. Snow White must make difficult ethical decisions, stand by her convictions, risk her life, trust others, and even show mercy. This moral compass becomes part of her leadership identity. She does not seek revenge for the queen's cruelty. She seeks restoration of the kingdom, healing, and justice. That moral orientation distinguishes her character and aligns the theme with contemporary values, leadership that serves and rebuilds instead of conquering and punishing. It's a telling update to the old fairy tale model. The film also addresses the theme of passing of power. Snow White inherits significant symbolic weight, the legacy of her parents, the hope of the people. But she does not simply accept a throne. She earns it. This moment of transition is central. Leadership is handed over, yet also redefined. The film suggests that new leadership demands new paradigms: inclusion, empathy, adaptability. Snow White's leadership therefore becomes a sign of hope, representing change and renewal. Viewers are encouraged to see themselves in it. Leadership is not reserved for royalty, but for those who act with courage and build trust. Importantly, the theme of courage and leadership is relatable for audiences beyond the fairy tale context. Many young people face pressure to lead in their own domains, to speak up, to stand for what is right, even when they feel unqualified. Snow White's journey mirrors that. She doesn't know everything, she makes mistakes, but she steps up and grows. That makes the story feel contemporary and empowering. It offers a blueprint. If fear is real, you act anyway. If you doubt, you connect with others. If the system is unfair, you build a new one. That resonates in today's cultural climate where legacy systems are changing and new voices seek influence. In the context of your YouTube channel and reviews, you can emphasize how the film uses its musical, visual, and narrative components to weave these themes deeply. For example, you could point out how certain songs shift in tone, early, hopeful melodies turning into stronger anthems of leadership, or how Snow White's first major public speech, or moment when she leads the companions into battle, marks a visual beat of transformation. You could compare how the original 1937 story hinted at leadership, Princess becomes queen, but did not emphasize the development of leadership skills. This version explicitly does so. In summation, the themes of courage and leadership in Snow White, 2025, are foundational, richly developed, and tailored to modern sensibilities. The film invites audiences to rethink what it means to be a hero, not one who waits, but one who rises. Not one who reigns in isolation, but one who rallies others. Not one who uses power over people, but power with people. Through Snow White's arc, the movie offers more than a fairy tale. It offers a mentorship of leadership, a call to action for audience members, and a vision of hope for communities longing for change. By the end, when Snow White stands before her people, the message is clear. Courage is contagious, leadership is collective, and the future belongs to those who believe enough to act. To those who believe enough to act. The magic mirror in Snow White, 2025, functions as more than just a plot device. It becomes the centerpiece of the film's darker tone, symbolic storytelling, and exploration of psychological conflict. In the original animated classic, the mirror simply announced who the fairest one of all was, sparking the queen's jealousy. But in this modern retelling, the mirror is reimagined with layers of intrigue, horror, and twisted seduction, an object that not only speaks truth but shapes desire, feeds insecurity, and manipulates the user. Gal Gadot's evil queen does not merely consult it. She becomes increasingly dependent on it, addicted to its validation and tormented by its honesty. This deepens the film's dark fantasy aesthetic, blending psychological terror with magical lore. The mirror becomes a presence, an omniscient entity watching everything unfold, amplifying the queen's fears and confrontations with self-worth, aging, and vulnerability. Its visual portrayal is made more sinister, a shifting surface like liquid darkness, a haunting voice echoing with ancient wisdom and quiet mockery. The filmmakers lean into horror elements, reflections that move on their own, flickers of a ghostly figure behind the glass, and a sense that the mirror contains trapped spirits or forgotten power. Dark fantasy elements expand beyond the mirror and bring a new maturity to the story. The Disney worlds of forests and palaces, traditionally bright and whimsical, are infused with creeping shadows, eerie blue-green tones, and unsettling quiet. The woods are not just home to friendly creatures, but first appear like a living nightmare. Branches twist into claws, wind howls like whispered warnings, and bioluminescent fungi cast unnatural glows. This visual contrast mirrors Snow White's emotional journey, from terror to trust, from exile to empowerment. The evil queen's magic also plays a more dominant role. Her potions, spells, and illusions are shot with cinematic focus, like dark ritual scenes with ancient runes, alchemical fumes, and incantations that reveal how far she is willing to go to preserve her power. It isn't staged like children's magic, but something with consequences. Magic that corrupts, rots, and consumes the soul. The forest animals, often cute in earlier versions, are shown with more realism and deeper emotional connection. Initially, they appear afraid of Snow White, assuming all humans are threats due to the queen's cruelty. That shift reinforces the theme that Snow White must earn trust, and that nature itself has been scarred by unjust rule. Even the dwarves, now reimagined as varied companions, carry darker backstories: exile, personal loss, survival in a kingdom plagued by tyranny. Their hidden refuge in the forest becomes a symbol of resistance and resilience, a place of wounded hope waiting for a leader bold enough to bring change. The dark fantasy aesthetic here does not exist just to make things scary. It expresses trauma and prepares the viewer for transformation. The magic mirror's role in shaping the queen's descent into madness becomes a psychological drama built into the fairy tale framework. The mirror's voice challenges her vanity, revealing that beauty alone cannot secure loyalty, respect, or love. It becomes a toxic relationship. She seeks reassurance, but the mirror grows increasingly cruel, revealing what she most fears. The queen's obsession with remaining fairest evolves into a metaphor for corruption of identity. She cannot accept aging, cannot accept others' strengths, and cannot imagine a world where power lies in something deeper than superficial beauty. The mirror, in essence, is the queen's worst enemy, even though she treats it as her greatest ally. This creates a chilling visual motif. Every scene where the queen stands before the mirror becomes darker, more violently lit, and more emotionally catastrophic. Early scenes show calm consultation. Later scenes show frantic pleading, kneeling before the mirror as though worshipping a false god. The mirror's surface becomes a battleground for the queen's mental state, shifting between clear reflection and monstrous distortions. The audience sees her losing herself, literally and symbolically, reflecting the cost of seeking power through fear rather than love. Meanwhile, Snow White's relationship to magic is tied more to nature and intuition rather than objects or dark rituals. She does not wield spells nor seek unnatural control. Instead, the magical elements around her arise from connection, the forest creatures responding to her kindness, the air seeming to brighten when she sings, and the natural world revealing hidden beauty as she heals emotionally. These subtler, gentler magic moments contrast sharply against the sinister force of the mirror. The movie suggests a dual philosophy. Magic rooted in empathy brings life, while magic rooted in ego brings destruction. This contrast heightens the stakes and empowers Snow White's eventual confrontation. In many scenes, the mirror becomes the source of the queen's final schemes. The poisoned apple, the illusion spells, the transformation into a disguised peddler, all originate from the mirror's taunts and twisting of her fears. The queen believes the mirror's promises, that eliminating Snow White will end her suffering and maintain her beauty. But the film visually suggests the opposite. Every act of violence ages her soul, and the mirror becomes increasingly monstrous in its reflection of her. This dark fantasy element teaches a lesson. Obsession with superficial perfection destroys what makes a person truly powerful. Interestingly, while the mirror speaks only to the queen, the film implies that Snow White senses its influence. She encounters cracked shards of reflective surfaces in the forest, each showing glimmers of the queen's control spreading outward. When Snow White finally realizes the extent of the queen's power, she accepts that defeating the queen means breaking the mirror's hold, not just destroying the queen's body but severing her bond with corruption. This interpretation builds to an epic climax where the mirror itself becomes a central target during their confrontation. Instead of only overthrowing a villain, Snow White must shatter an entire system of magical oppression. The dark fantasy tone also enhances how the supporting cast responds to threats. Instead of merely hiding from danger, they face it with intelligence and strategy. The companions speak of legends about the mirror, stories from long before Snow White was born, suggesting that the queen's rule is only the latest chapter in a much older curse. This expands world-building. The kingdom has a deeper magical history, ancient darkness lingering beneath royal glamour. When Snow White steps into leadership, she must understand this legacy rather than simply inherit a throne. Every time the mirror appears, the film uses sound design to unsettle viewers. Metallic echoes, reversed whispers, deep resonant notes that suggest the mirror isn't just speaking, it's alive. The haunting repetition of "who is the fairest of them all" becomes a curse phrase that eats away at the queen's sanity. The mirror's voice is neither male nor female, a supernatural monotone separating it from humanity entirely. Its presence implies that the queen is never alone. Even when she wishes she could escape her insecurity, the mirror stalks her self-image. This heightened horror atmosphere does not overshadow the story but enriches it. Audiences experience suspense and dread as the queen grows more dangerous. The magic is a reminder that fairy tales at their core are ancient warnings wrapped in wonder. Snow White, 2025, embraces that truth, refusing to sanitize the dangers that make the heroine's courage meaningful. Dark fantasy elements reveal the cost of bravery, real threats, real suffering, and real stakes. The mirror's eventual destruction, if the film follows the symbolic arc it sets, would represent the breaking of fear's control over the kingdom. When the mirror breaks, the queen's illusion of superiority collapses, and the trapped darkness dissipates. The people are freed not only from tyranny but from the ideology that beauty equals value. Snow White's leadership then becomes a restoration, not of mirrors and appearances, but of real human connection. Dark fantasy in Snow White, 2025, shows that fairy tales can evolve with audiences, turning visual magic into metaphor, turning childish wonder into mature meaning. The magic mirror is no longer a simple narrative tool. It is the shadow side of humanity, a reminder that evil often begins with insecurity. Snow White's story becomes more empowering in contrast, a narrative about defeating darkness not by becoming darker, but by remaining truthful, hopeful, and connected to others. By embracing these horror-infused visuals, psychological storytelling, and symbolic battles, Snow White, 2025, bridges classic fantasy with modern cinematic depth. It empowers viewers to see beyond surface beauty and recognize where real magic lives. In courage that shines through fear, in empathy that outlasts cruelty, and in leadership that refuses to be manipulated by vanity or illusions. The mirror reflects darkness so that Snow White's light can grow brighter, transforming the tale into a richly textured dark fantasy adventure worthy of a new generation. Snow White, 2025, elevates its narrative intensity with a series of action-packed adventure moments that drive the plot forward, deepen the emotional tension, and visually showcase the heroine's transformation from a sheltered princess into a brave leader. These scenes are crafted not merely for spectacle, but to reveal character, intensify conflict, and capture the stakes of a kingdom under the iron grip of the evil queen. The first major action moment emerges during Snow White's dramatic escape from the palace, an expanded sequence far more thrilling and elaborate than in the original tale. As the queen orders her royal guards to eliminate Snow White, the scene erupts into a chase through towering castle corridors, flickering torchlight creating bursts of shadow and urgency. Snow White navigates through hidden passages once built for emergency escape, showing quick thinking under pressure. The guards, clad in dark armor and driven by fear of the queen, storm behind her. The audience witnesses her first encounter with real danger, her first test of survival instincts. This tense pursuit scene sets the tone. This Snow White must fight to live. As she flees into the forest, the danger does not subside. Instead, the natural world becomes a chaotic battlefield. The trees loom like monstrous figures and the roots twist deliberately to trip her steps, as though the forest itself is testing whether she is worth saving. The darkness feels alive, an embodiment of Snow White's panic. She runs breathlessly, dodging wolves that lurk between the shadows, their glowing eyes reflecting hunger and suspicion. A moment arrives where a cliff suddenly appears beneath her feet. She nearly falls, clinging desperately to a vine, a visual symbol of her fragile hold on survival. The fear, the pounding heartbeat, the sense of isolation. This is not a storybook escape, but a visceral fight for life. The music crescendos, and in the final moment before she collapses from exhaustion, the companions, formerly dwarves, emerge and rescue her, pulling her from certain death. This action beat marks the first moment of trust between her and her newfound allies. The forest refuge becomes a training ground for Snow White, and this leads into the next crucial action sequence, the ambush attack by the Queen's hunters. Snow White refuses to remain a hidden, passive figure. Instead, with the help of her companions, she learns to climb trees, leap across ravines, and wield small weapons for self-defense. These training montage moments add a sense of empowerment and preparation, building excitement toward the battles ahead. Soon after, when the Queen's forces discover their hideout, a tactical fight erupts. Snow White and her companions set traps using branches, rocks, ropes, and handmade gadgets. What follows is an action scene full of improvisation and teamwork. The hunters strike with crossbows and swords, but the companions move with unity, defending their home. Snow White takes a leadership role, giving commands, guiding others to safety, and confronting danger head-on. The cinematic choreography shows her evolving from a frightened escapee into a coordinator of resistance. Another standout moment is the daring nighttime infiltration of the Queen's supply convoy. The companions and Snow White work together to raid a wagon carrying food and stolen goods, redistributing them to villagers hiding in the forest. This scene plays like a thrilling heist in a fantasy world, complete with stealth tactics, distractions, and split-second timing. Snow White shows courage as she risks recapture, leaping from wagon to wagon under a moonlit sky softened by drifting fog. The sense of motion, galloping horses, clanking armor, and close calls amplify the thrill. We see Snow White's confidence grow as she realizes she can strike blows against tyranny without relying on magic or royal privilege. The emotional satisfaction in this moment is strong. Audiences feel the shift in power beginning. As the Queen recognizes Snow White's rise, she turns to more aggressive magical attacks, leading to one of the film's darkest and most breathtaking scenes, the illusion-haunted forest battle. Snow White, separated from her group, finds herself surrounded by hallucinations designed to break her spirit. Trees transform into monstrous figures, the ground melts into swirling voids, and ghostly versions of herself taunt her with doubts. The viewer is thrust into Snow White's psychological struggle. She must keep moving, breathing, believing, even when every reflection suggests she will fail. With trembling hands and rapid breath, she breaks free from the nightmare illusions by remembering who she is and what she fights for. This battle of mind over manipulation is intense and visually spectacular, reinforcing that courage is not only physical. The film reaches peak action as Snow White leads a full-scale uprising inside the castle walls. Sneaking through the same escape passages she once used to flee, she now returns with strategy and fire in her heart. The companions create diversions, cutting off guard reinforcements, setting smoke traps, and using the Queen's own defenses against her. Snow White confronts elite guards in the main hall, and the choreography becomes fast, acrobatic, and emotionally explosive. She doesn't fight with brute strength but agility and determination, ducking, dodging, outsmarting opponents instead of overpowering them. Each movement screams survival and defiance, each close call reminding viewers that the cost of freedom is high. Meanwhile, the Queen unleashes dark magic across the palace, lightning bolts, swirling shadow clouds, and blasts of energy that tear through walls. The castle shakes with the clash of hope and hatred. Snow White and her allies reach the throne room in a final showdown. The battle with the Queen is staged like a mythic confrontation, mirror shards floating around like sharp wings, magic swirling in violent circles, and Snow White standing tall against a force older and crueler than she ever imagined. When the Queen transforms, perhaps into her iconic old hag disguise or a darker, more monstrous version of herself, Snow White must face fear without hesitation. It becomes a test of heart, not power. The cinematic details in these action scenes heighten emotion. Sweat rolling down Snow White's cheek, her rapid breathing as she pushes forward, the desperate cries of villagers as the tide of battle shifts, the moment where she reaches out and pulls a companion to safety at the last second. These shots emphasize that bravery isn't glamorous. It's exhausting and painful, but it's worth it. As the fighting intensifies, the Queen aims her final strike, one that could destroy Snow White and her future. It's here that Snow White makes her most daring move, going after the root of evil, the magic mirror itself. She deflects the Queen's magic long enough to reach the mirror and shatter it with symbolic force. The explosion erupts in a burst of silence, glass and magic dissolving into air, darkness fading, and the Queen frozen in disbelief as her power collapses. Snow White emerges bruised but victorious. This is not a triumph of strength alone. It's the result of every lesson she learned in the wild, every moment she refused to quit, and every act of courage that built a movement around her. After the dust settles, the final adventure beat is not violent, yet it is triumphant. Snow White ventures among the rescued villagers, helping people rise from hiding. The people cheer not because a princess returned, but because a leader fought for them. She steps onto the balcony, reclaiming the castle not as her safe home, but as a beacon of justice. The action has transformed her into a queen, not by birthright, but by bravery. These action-packed moments are not inserted simply to entertain. They are the heartbeat of Snow White, 20-25. Each sequence is a different layer of her journey, a chase for escape, a battle for trust, an infiltration for justice, a struggle for identity, and a war for the soul of the kingdom. The movie ensures that the audience not only watches her fight but feels every stake along the way. By the end, viewers understand that the legend of Snow White is not a fairy tale about being saved. It is a heroic saga about learning to save yourself and others. Save yourself and others. Audience expectations for Snow White, 2025, have been extremely high from the moment Disney announced the live-action adaptation. Fans around the world have grown up with the 1937 animated classic, and for many, Snow White is not just a movie. It is a piece of childhood history, a symbol of Disney's beginning and a fairy tale that shaped generations. Because of that deep emotional connection, people want this updated version to be magical, respectful, and faithful to the original spirit. Viewers expect breathtaking visuals, unforgettable music, a heartfelt emotional core, and characters who feel both nostalgic and new. The excitement has been huge on social media, where fans constantly discuss cast choices, teaser moments, and every detail leaked from the production. Many are eager to see how Rachel Zegler will give life to such an iconic character and how Gal Gadot will deliver her dark and extremely important role as the evil queen. While expectations bring excitement, they also add enormous pressure on the film to satisfy both old and new fans. At the same time, fan reactions have been a mix of hope and curiosity. Some fans fully support Disney's decision to give Snow White a modern, empowering personality, seeing it as necessary growth that keeps the story relevant for today's audience. They appreciate the idea that Snow White will not just be a princess waiting for rescue, but a brave heroine actively shaping her own destiny. These fans look forward to a version of Snow White who is strong, smart, and emotionally deep, without losing the kindness and goodness that define her character. Others are mainly excited about the film's visual transformation, the new designs for the forest, the castle, and the magical world. Disney's reputation for stunning CGI and cinematography has fans expecting a breathtaking fantasy experience unlike anything seen before in a Snow White adaptation. However, as with any iconic remake, not all fans react positively to every change. Some are worried about the film shifting too far away from the original story. They fear that changes in character roles, themes, or tone may dilute the classic fairy tale charm. Fans who grew up with the Seven Dwarfs as beloved characters are especially sensitive about how they are reimagined, and discussions online often debate whether modern updates might lose the movie's heart. There are also viewers who want the musical style, costumes, and personalities to remain very close to the original because they believe tradition is the key to Snow White's magic. These mixed feelings create a huge balancing challenge for the filmmakers, satisfying nostalgia while still introducing fresh, exciting ideas. Another big part of fan reaction comes from the film's darker tone. The trailers and early visuals show a strong fantasy adventure feel, with tense, suspenseful scenes that may surprise people expecting a soft fairy tale. Some fans are thrilled. They love the dark, cinematic direction and believe it brings more emotional depth and realism. Others feel unsure because they want Snow White to stay lighthearted and comforting like the classic movie. This discussion proves how personally people hold this story. Everyone has their own version of Snow White in their heart. The movie must walk a fine emotional line. Thrilling enough for modern audiences, but still full of warmth, innocence, and optimism. Music has always been central to Snow White's legacy, and fans have been vocal about wanting unforgettable songs in the new adaptation. The original soundtrack is timeless. Fans expect the new version to honor that history while presenting songs that are powerful, emotional, and capable of capturing the magic of the story. Viewers hope the musical experience will elevate key moments like Snow White singing in the forest or the transformation of her relationship with the animals and allies around her. If the music connects deeply with audiences, it could become one of the biggest strengths of the movie. Ultimately, fan reactions show one clear message. People care deeply about Snow White. They want this movie to succeed not just commercially but emotionally. They want a film that honors Disney history while giving today's younger audience a new hero to love. The excitement, the debates, the hopes, and the concerns all prove that Snow White's story still matters, even after nearly a century. As the release approaches, one thing is certain: millions of eyes will be watching closely, ready to celebrate or criticize, but definitely ready to experience the magic. The filmmakers know the responsibility they carry, and audiences are waiting to see if this new version of Snow White will truly redefine a fairy tale for the next generation. Snow White 2025 represents more than just a remake of the first-ever Disney princess film. It symbolizes the evolution of storytelling, filmmaking, and cultural values over nearly 100 years. This movie bridges the past and the future, combining the beloved nostalgia of the original tale with a bold new vision created for today's audience. The heart of Snow White's story has always been rooted in hope, kindness, and resilience, and the film preserves those timeless qualities while giving Snow White a stronger, more active role in shaping her own destiny. Instead of waiting to be saved, she becomes the hero of her own fairy tale. Her bravery inspires not only the characters around her, but also the viewers who have admired her for decades. The film marks a major milestone in Disney's live-action journey. With advanced CGI technology, detailed set designs, and breathtaking fantasy environments, it creates a new level of visual wonder. This world is full of magic and emotion, a place where dreams can be fragile, danger can be real, and the triumph of good over evil feels powerful and earned. By reimagining the evil queen, the film explores deeper psychological conflicts and makes the villain's motives feel more human yet more terrifying. The magic mirror, the enchanted forest, and the classic symbols of the story are visually transformed to reflect a darker and more adventurous tone, an exciting departure that adds thriller-like intensity to the fairy tale. But while the visuals may be modern, the soul of the movie stays true to its classic message. Real beauty comes from a pure heart. Snow White's kindness, empathy, and belief in goodness make her stronger than any evil magic. She is not flawless. She learns, grows, and sometimes falls, but she never stops believing. That character development resonates with a world where people struggle with identity, confidence, and social expectations every day. Her journey teaches viewers that courage and compassion can change destiny, and that leadership is not about power but about protecting others. Movie also aims to inspire the next generation, who didn't grow up with the 1937 classic. This Snow White is more relatable. She has dreams, fears, and ambitions that connect with young audiences. She doesn't fit into the old definition of a princess. She creates her own definition. By giving her purpose and agency, the film allows children, especially young girls, to see themselves as heroes of their own stories. This shift doesn't erase the fairy tale magic. It expands it, making the story more meaningful and empowering for everyone watching. As a whole, Snow White 2025 has the opportunity to open a new era for fairy tales, one where tradition and progress live side by side. Fans who loved the original can rediscover the magic through a fresh lens, while new viewers can experience a version of Snow White that feels exciting, relevant, and emotionally impactful. Whether through its characters, visuals, soundtrack, or themes, the film reminds us that fairy tales evolve, just like the people who love them. And even in a changing world, the core message remains. Kindness is strength. Love defeats hate, and a hopeful heart can illuminate even the darkest path. In the end, this movie is not simply retelling history. It is rewriting it with respect and bravery. It celebrates the legacy of Disney's first princess while signaling a bold future for storytelling. Snow White's journey is far from over. It is being reborn for a whole new generation. And if this adaptation succeeds in capturing that balance of old and new, it will secure Snow White's place in cinematic history, once again, as the fairest story of them all.